Oh, good morning and welcome to another episode of The Happy Head. I'm your host, Paul Wilson. The reason why I'm laughing is that every time I record one of these, I do 30 seconds of silence. And what I just do halfway through my 30 seconds of silence, I hit my bloody microphone. It's just the way it goes, isn't it? And today I'm joined by the lovely Laura Jane Hand. Good morning, Laura. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. It's going to be a great chat today. Um, I've got to apologise. We've just been chatting about something, which is your book, and I was going to say Laura Jane Hand, the author of, and I forgot the title of your book. I'm really, really sorry. Go on, can you flash it?
It's
More Than a
called,
Mindset. Now, this is not a book promo conversation. That's what Laura's written. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So, what's your story, Laura Jane? Or do I
my
call you Laura
story.
or Laura Jane?
Laura Jane would be
Laura,
amazing.
right? Laura Jane. I'm calling you Laura Jane. Good morning, Laura Jane.
Good morning. And that's a really good place to start, actually. That for years, ever since I was born, I was called Jane. My name's Laura Jane, but I was always called Jane. And it never felt right. It just never felt like my name. And then about in October last year, I went to an event and my coach said, how different coaches and different people, famous people that we all know, aren't called the real name. They've changed it. And I was like, really? Do people do this? And he listed off a few really key people. And I was like, right, well, what can I be called? So, as I used to do, I went off thinking, well, that would be better and that would be better. And then I realized my name is Laura Jane. And when I said that, and I kind of it was like an AA meeting, you get up and say, hi, I'm Laura Jane and I'm an alcoholic. It was like, hi, I'm Laura Jane. And actually, that's my name. And it feels really good. And when I said that and I changed my name, it's like this new person came out and I got the book finished like we were just saying then, it took me 5 years from the idea of the book to actually getting it published on Amazon. But in those 3 months from October to December, I completely finished it. Really like changed different bits, did the front cover, got it on Amazon, did everything I needed to do because I'd sort of this rebirth, this sort of new me had come forward. That's part of the story that I just didn't even expect to be telling you today.
Why did people call you Jane? Was that your first name, or was that your middle name, or what's the reason?
That was my middle name, and it's because my older brother couldn't say Laura. So in their wisdom, my mum and dad thought it would be best to call me Jane until he could start to talk. I mean, they look back and they're like, why did we do that? I've got no idea because we told all the adults. So it was just weird. You just don't feel like yourself. And then when I learned other people change their names, I was like, well, I'll do it as well. And then it was like a new me came out into the world.
That's amazing. I mean, one of my favorite all-time movie actors, John Wayne, big 6'4" cowboy. Yeah, his first name was Marion. His originally his birth name. Yeah,
Wow.
and so he changed it to John Wayne, which he just looks like John Wayne.
Yeah,
So yeah. And you're not the first person to kind of tell me this story of a name change, changing your personality and changing your character. A friend of mine who I've lost contact with now years and years ago, same kind of story. They had a middle name, which for some bizarre reason kind of became their first name, and they hated it. So when they were, I don't know, in their sort of late 20s, early 30s, they had some money. So they changed it by deed poll, actually got rid of the middle name and created a brand new name for themselves.
it
And
is. It's really weird because the sort of name Jane, no disrespect to any listeners that are called Jane, people used to say things like plain Jane, you sort of take that on board, as a child, and you're growing up, and you take that sort of philosophy on board and that image of yourself. And it wasn't me, and I always thought that's not me. And then so you actually become who you're meant to be, which is your own lumming name, Laura J. And it's like shackles have come off. It's like, wow, I can be who I want to be now, not. And like you say, I've done a bit of research into it afterwards, and the amount of people that do this, and then they have a new lease of life, and you think, why doesn't everybody do it that feels stuck? Let's all change our names.
yeah, well, I'm really lucky because My first name is Paul. My middle name is Leslie, Leslie. And apparently, just before I was born, there was a bit of a tug of war between my mum and my dad about whether I was going to be Paul Leslie or Leslie Paul, because Leslie was, I think it was one of my dad's friends' names. So that's what he wanted to call me. And I'm just so glad it's Paul Leslie, not Leslie Paul. Because again, no disrespect to anybody that's called Leslie, but it's just not me, and it's not a name. So I never use the word Leslie unless it's on like bank statements and stuff like that. It's just Paul
Easily,
Wilson, because Wilson is such a common name. It's a bit like Smith. There are billions of us, and even on Facebook, yeah, there's about 7 or 8 Paul Wilsons on Facebook, all different. I've actually got 2 friends or people that I know on Facebook that are called Paul Wilson. So again, it's just one of those things that you're kind of stuck with unless you take action to change it. And my challenge is I don't have a name that I would prefer to be. Like you said, Laura Jane really works for you. Well, I don't have a thing like that. So I'm kind of not stuck, but I've got the name I've got is the name I use, and that's it. But I do get it and I do understand it. And it
yeah,
does actually create almost physical changes in a person as well.
massively so. It's changed the way I sort of hold myself, the way I introduce myself instead of "Hi, I'm Jane." The Jane that stands on the second row and doesn't shine and holds back and doesn't write a book. Who's Jane to write a book? It's like you're getting the full me now. You're getting Laura Jane that was always there, but was just hiding in the background. And if I'd listened to somebody say that a few years ago, I would have thought she's a bit loopy. But when the more sort of work that you do on yourself, and the more you keep putting one foot in front of the other, the more you just become yourself, don't you? You just like the book Unapologetically You. You just become you. Why it has to take this long, and why you can't just do this for being young, but we get there in the end, don't we?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that you kind of think it's loopy. I believe a lot of problems in the world are for that very reason, that we see somebody dress in a certain way or act in a certain way or be a certain way, and we go, well, that's crazy, that's loopy, because we don't understand. It's only when we find ourselves in that situation that we go, ah, actually, yeah, it's not so loopy after all. I completely understand. But again,
Yeah,
it's that lack of understanding.
yeah, it's that word, isn't it? Understanding and being open. We can be so closed minded into thinking this is the way and this is the route. And we're sort of told that, like, exactly why I wrote the book. How many times do we hear mindset is the key? So I'd be like, right, okay, that's the key, then I'll get everything I want. Boom. And I was doing the positive thinking, I was doing the affirmations, I was even doing tapping to
Oh, yeah, yeah,
change.
all that, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I was doing everything and I was still really very unhappy and lost. And I thought, right, I need to open my eyes. What else is out there? Because I feel like something's missing. And that's exactly where the book came from. It wasn't designed, it was just sort of what I've learned and how it sort of came about. So it was really organic in a way.
So, do you mind sharing why were you kind of in this unhappy, lost space that kind of pushed you to write the book in the first place?
Yeah, I always didn't feel good enough. I always felt like there was something missing. Like, it's almost like everybody else had this like secret club and these secret genes, this powerful gene within them. And it was like I'd missed out on it. And I always thought, like, why is everybody else all with it and together and knows what they're doing and what they want and how to get it? And everybody else seemed to, manifestation. Oh yeah, I can do that at the click of my fingers. And I just wasn't getting it. And then I was sort of in a corporate job, just quite unhappy. I was earning a lot of money, so I was buying a lot of things. And the more I bought, the unhappier I became. So I started to search for like more meaning, and I read philosophies, Buddhism, Hinduism. I read the Quran. I read the Bible inside out, the Bhagavad Gita. It was like I need to know what is missing. Like what has everybody else got that I've not? And then I just went on this big worldwide search to find myself and to find the missing pieces that I ended up putting into a book.
Uh, How long did that kind of process of finding yourself take, including the name change as well, I guess?
I'd say about 12 years. So from the moment it was sort of that, as we were saying before, when you're in your early 20s and you sort of enjoying yourself, and then you sort of move into this phase of work, and then you get bills, and then life, and you buy the car, you buy the house, you buy all the clothes, you get the promotion. And whilst that world was great for a while, going out partying after work and drinks and cocktails, and yeah, I just started to think like, I always thought there was more to life when I was younger. You sort of have this vision of what do you want to be when you're older, and I just felt very much in a box.
Mhm.
And then I started to want to get out of the box, and that's where it all really started from.
So you're in a high paying corporate job, and then did you kind of quit all of a sudden to take up your current kind of career, or was it a gradual kind of shift? Did you have like a side hustle? What was the process? What happened?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. So it was a little bit of a side hustle. It was like do the training, do everything that I needed to do to move eventually. But I think the biggest catalyst came from just stress, but overwhelming stress. So it was almost, what's the word, where it's continuous and chronic. It was like
Mhm.
chronic stress, and then it would sort of ease off at the weekends, and then it would intensify during the week. And then me and my husband were trying for children, and we had two miscarriages, like one after the other. So one in 2015, one in 2016. And I just sort of did a lot of research into it, and it was all the research I was sort of coming up with. It was all about stress and the impact on the woman, and everything that's functioning or not. And then I just started to think that life shouldn't really have to be this stressful. And I was drawn to sort of improving myself, and then everything that I've sort of been through, I started to think, like you do, I can help other people and
Mhm.
not stop, because you need to experience things, but help guide people through the same sort of thing that I've been through.
And when did you make the leap from kind of side hustle to doing it full time?
Good question. I attempted to make the leap a couple of times, but I was always drawn back to the security and the money and the normality. I think, that I knew that the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, it felt really normal and safe in a weird kind of way.
Oh, absolutely, it is. Yeah.
And then, but this call, it was just an overwhelming calling that I kept getting, and it was like, when are you going to write the book? When are you going to do the coaching full time? When are you going to do it? And when I had the time off with my son on maternity, it just felt like a really good break, to say, right, this is the line in the sand. And we sort of cut our cloth accordingly. We could have upgraded cars, we could have moved house, we could have spent thousands on holidays. And we just started to think, well, how do we want to live? Like, what lifestyle do we want? I was rushing out. I went back for 2 months after I'd had my son. So that was another one. It was like, oh, I'll go back.
Yeah.
And that was the final straw, because I remember seeing my son at the top of the stairs, and I was rushing out unhappy at like 7 o'clock in the morning to go and get the tram into Manchester to go to a job I didn't want to go to. And I just thought, I don't want to teach him that this is the way, from being like 2 years old, seeing mummy going out unhappy to a job she doesn't really want to do, when there was another way, there was something else I could do. So that actually, you've just made me realize that was the trigger.
Wow. So you don't do things by halves, do you? You've got a toddler, you quit your job, and you start writing a book all around about the same kind of time.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
and start a podcast
And start a podcast at the same time as well.
and start coaching people.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I just it's one of those things, isn't it? It's like all or nothing. I'd done nothing. I'd done a little bit about it for years. I'd done the training. I'd done my own work, but it was like, how unhappy, how much longer do you want to remain unhappy for not being yourself and not expressing yourself the way you want to be? And some people come out. I always kind of describe it as, when people have been like in a marriage or with a partner and it's man and woman, and then they come out and they say that they're gay, and they feel liberated and they're finally themselves. It's almost like a little bit like that. It's like you could finally just be yourself and just be you. Yeah.
I find this fascinating because every person I speak to that's kind of made that leap from the corporate world to working for themselves has a different, not reason, but a different thing, a different outlook, a different view. Like you mentioned about having this calling to help people. And in my case, I've always been in kind of jobs that were helping people, but doing what I do now is much more intimate on like a one-to-one kind of basis, whereas before it's like, one-to-many kind of things. So, but everybody I speak to has some kind of an event or happening or just thing that kind of just gently pushes them over the edge and go, there you go, Paul, off you go. Boom. Oh, all right.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's that saying where you don't have the wings, you find them on the way down, kind of thing. You sort of get pushed off the edge, don't you? You don't want you want to do it, but you don't want to do it because you're so scared. And then you sort of given this final push, and you're like, right, okay, I'm gonna need to
Yeah.
learn how to fly
Message
now.
received. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. I'm on the way now.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
how do you help people? What's your niche? What's your area of speciality? What do you do?
Yeah, so it's my focus is all about relationships, which predominantly is all about intimate relationships,
Hmm.
where a woman is doing exactly what I was doing, is working in the corporate world, is very, busy, stressed, has a lot to do, has kids, has family, has a lifestyle, a mortgage to pay, and they've got some disconnection with the partner, because obviously that's where I came from and that's what I learned to sort of heal. But it also goes deeper than that, because it's, as you know, the relationship, the first and most important relationship is the one we've got with ourselves. So I say relationships, but it's sort of so much more than that, and it goes so much deeper, because often in relationships, when things aren't working, we often look outside of ourselves for other things to help us, to soothe us, to solve everything, and we often blame other people. And what I do with the women that I work with is really work with them to get them into a really great place, so that they're operating really well internally. So they feel good, they feel strong, they feel healthy again, because the most are out of balance. And they just find this happiness and this contentment and find themselves again within all of the roles that they've taken on, of wife, of mother, of daughter, of colleague, of boss, and it's like, who am I in the world? Like, I used to know myself and now I don't. So we really go deep and really help women to be themselves, and then the better in their relationships.
Would you say that women are under more pressure these days to be Wonder Woman, Superwoman, Supergirl, because they're expected to, like you say, run a Fortune 500 company, look glamorous, live on 2 lettuce leaves a day, have 16 adorable children, and a husband who is also, front page model Hulk kind of thing. It's bizarre. It's gone from kind of one extreme to another almost, hasn't it? What do you think?
I feel that pressure. So I've got one child, a 3.5-year-old boy, and I feel that pressure. It's almost like one isn't enough. And if you've not got 3 or 4 or 6, and they all look perfectly dressed and they're
Mm.
all out the door and they all do what you say, and then you've got this glamorous career, and it doesn't look like that. And I feel the pressure to have more children when I am actually quite content with one. But it's almost like the hustle. It's like the hustle is sort of glamorized, and if you're not hustling, you're not working. Well, actually, the hustle can stress people out. It can really make people knock them off the center and make them ill. So the hustle has been glamorized, and it's not that glamorous. Whereas the woman with that being, we're always doing. We should be doing. We should be the best mum. We should look great. Our kids should be perfect. We should have the perfect business career. We're spinning all of these plates. And whether that's us taking it on or whether that's society, social media that's sort of encouraging that, it's certainly present. And I certainly feel it, that I should be having more kids and I should be here and there and my house should be bigger. And I mean, somebody once said to me, "Why haven't you upgraded your car for a long time?" And I was like, we really having this conversation? Like, what about how are you? And how are you? Just how are you? How's life? How are you feeling? How's the kids? How's your husband? But it's yeah, it's I'm really passionate about this, as you can see, because there's a lot of pressure, and I think men get it as well. I think there's a lot of pressure on men to be the perfect dad and be at home and be a good dad, but also nail it at work. And it's really, let's come back to the basics, the fundamentals that are so often overlooked and underestimated in the power. Like, people say, well, why would I want to work on my relationships? Well, the fundamentals. If something isn't right in you or your marriage, then something isn't going to be working in your life.
Oh God, that just sums up life, I think. Why would you want to work on your relationship? You need to spend 10 years at school and university to become a doctor. You need to spend hours and hours and hours in a simulator before you can fly an aeroplane and get yourself licensed. To drive a car, you've got to take lessons and pass a test. But to have kids and get married, there's no rules. As long as you're over 16 or whatever, it's just straight in there. And for people to say, why work on your relationship, is just the most ridiculous thing anyone can ever say. I probably wouldn't have been divorced now if I'd known more about how to make a relationship work and about how communication is
Exactly.
fundamental in a relationship. And I think a lot of people could say the same thing. I mean, okay, there are
Exactly.
some relationships that just were never
Yeah.
going to work. We get
Yeah.
that. But there's
Yeah.
an awful lot that could have worked if we'd done the work in them. So when people say that, it's just the most loopy thing anybody can say.
Exactly, and that's why I'm really passionate about it, because and my tagline is bringing the spark back, because the spark was there. We obviously fell in love with that person. We saw the good. Things happen along the way. Life happens. I mean, kids come at the complete wrong time. When we've got mortgages, when we've got careers, they don't come when we're 60 or 70 and we've got more time, and we've not got a mortgage potentially, and we've got all of these stresses on us, and we've not sort of healed any issues we've been through as children or any baggage we've picked up. And like you say, if we could just be taught how to communicate and what men want and what women want, and like, even the other day, you would think my husband knows all this by now, and I just wanted to vent. I was feeling the pressure of FOMO, fear of missing out. Oh my god, I'm going to miss out if I don't do this course, if I don't go to this event. And I just wanted to rant. That is what, as a woman, we kind of just want to talk about our feelings. Steve, being the most amazing man, wanted to fix it. And that's one of the things. And once we learn that men give solutions, women just want to talk about the
Mm.
feelings. When we learn how to sort of deal with each other and be with each other, it can completely transform. Whereas a conversation can turn quickly into frustration, resentment, and anger, we can turn it round and feel the love within it, instead. And you're right, the amount of people that split up unnecessarily to go and find somebody else because we think we'll find happiness in another thing, another person, yet we've not worked on ourselves and we've not healed ourselves before we do that.
I think you just hit on something really, really important there, Laura Jane. You were saying that, you know, women want to kind of talk things through, and the man in the relationship wants to kind of fix it. So we're both coming at it with good intentions, but from the
Absolutely.
wrong angles. And unfortunately, if we're not careful, those wrong angles can kind of lead to misunderstanding and frustration and anger, and then unfortunately we split over time
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
we're both coming at it from the wrong way, and neither of us understands the other person's perspective because we've never kind of sat down and talked about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's because we're sort of scared to, we don't know how to approach it. It might have gone wrong in the past. It might be a really difficult subject. And if it's about money and we've got different beliefs about money and different experiences, some people are spenders, some are savers, some are fearful of it, some are more frivolent. There's so much going on, and it's how to do it, like you say. If we were taught this at school, how to be with other people, how to interact with them, how to get the best out of other people, how to get the best out of ourselves, then we'd be cooking on gas, but we're not told this stuff. So it's about learning and having that compassion, and really taking a step back and knowing sort of how to react. So when the woman wants to talk and the man doesn't really want to listen that much because he wants to fix it, then he now knows how to react when that happens. She feels better. He walks away feeling great because he's helped his wife and his partner. So both people walk away feeling great. So the energy is then, it just multiplies.
Mm.
But yeah, we're not taught this stuff, which is why I'm clearly passionate about teaching it.
I think one of the biggest problems about it not being taught, and I was talking about something similar to this the other day, is that we don't live in communities anymore. If you go back to say just before the Industrial Revolution, we still lived in big family groups, as in a small town or a small village. There'd be uncles and aunties and grandparents, and there'd be lots of immediate family close by. So if you had a problem, you could go and kind of talk to someone and they'd be able to listen, or you'd sit around the fireside at night and tell each other stories. And through those stories, we'd learn about how relationships work, and we'd learn about what this person what really meant when they talked about X, Y, or Z. Well, now we've become so individualized almost, and it's getting sort of more and more like that every day, that we live in these little pockets of isolation of one, two, three, or four people, and we don't have those connections, those close by connections where you can just, I remember as a small kid, the neighbors were always in and out each other's houses for cups of tea and chit chats and stuff like that. You just don't see that anymore. I mean, I live in a house that's been converted into flats, and I hardly ever see any of my neighbours. Maybe occasionally on the doorstep as we're going in and out of the house to say hello, good morning, and that's it. So I
Mm.
think one of the biggest issues is because we tend to say, well, they should teach us that at school. Well, if they taught us everything at school, kids would be at school 24/7,
Yeah.
and the teachers have to work shifts, and the kids would never get any sleep. So I think as fans, we do kind of bear responsibility. But the problem is, if you don't know what you don't know, how can you share what you don't know that you don't know?
And that's a good point, actually, because it's sort of those connections with Zoom at the minute. Lockdowns, we're even more isolated and relationships are under even more strain. But we've sort of there's two things about talking to other people. It can be good and it cannot be good depending on
Mm,
who we talk to. If we're missing out on that wisdom from the people that have sort of been there, done it, worn a t-shirt, are generally a lot older than us, who can give us that wisdom of how, like one of the wisest comments I got was, Laura Jane, just you need to give more, like you're not giving in the relationship. And she said, only what you are not giving can be lacking in any situation. And I thought, I'd paid thousands for this coach, by the way. And I thought, the blame's on me. Like, it's him. I want to blame him because then I'll feel better. But it was true. And when I started to do the steps that we were taught to do, it was like, wow, this is working. So all of these blocks I've got and all of this anger, this hate I've got towards my partner, I'm blocking it, I'm the blocker. And I obviously paid for that advice, but that wisdom can come from older family members as
Mm.
well. Sometimes we do go to the wrong people for relationship advice, and we just get the same, pretty much get people agreeing with us. Like, have you ever talked to a friend or complained to a work colleague and it's like, oh yeah, I know what you mean, men are like this, and blah, blah, blah. You almost go down a bit of a bitchy, gossipy kind of route, and you don't get the wisdom that you can get through that community and through that family heritage. And Zoom's lockdowns is kind of making that even more, making us more disconnected, isn't it? In a way, but then we're connected in another way through Zoom.
I think it's just a continuation. We're becoming more disparate. The more society advances, the more those pockets of isolation expand. I mean, there's a massive housing shortage in the UK, and it's because more and more couples are breaking up. And so, obviously, the person that moves out the house needs somewhere to live, hence the housing shortage. It's not as if there's a massive influx of people. It's unfortunately, people are splitting up. And I think lockdown is two things going to happen. There was a lady who was talking to you the other day who was a midwife, and we were joking about this. She said, I'm really busy right now. I said, I bet you're going to be even busier in 8, 9 months' time. And she laughed at that. But conversely, there's a lot of people who are in very, very difficult situations right now because they're in a relationship that they don't necessarily want to be in for whatever
Yeah,
reason. It's not go down that road, but they
yeah.
can't get out of it because they're literally stuck inside the house. And maybe someone that they only saw for a couple of hours at night when they came home from work or at weekends kind of thing. They're with them 24/7 now. And that's causing all kinds of, horrendous friction.
Yeah, add on kids, add on working, a job, homeschooling, money, fear,
All of it.
people are poorly, it's intense. And this is where people either, where relationships, we talk about different levels in relationships. And if it's at, like we say, level two, it becomes a bit roommatey, you're more like a house share and
Mhm.
ships that pass by in the night. That can go on for so long, but you add in a lockdown and a relationship can easily become dysfunctional where both parties are genuinely very unhappy and unfulfilled within it. And it's easier, as you know, to get down from a two to a one than it is from a three to a one, to that healthy relationship again. But it is possible, and it doesn't always need to end in divorce or splitting up. It's just, we need to work on what to do within that situation where it was a couple of hours a day with your own freedom, your own life, the office to go to, meetings to go to, other people. And it's now we're sort of locked in with these people that we just can't focus on, but how they're annoying us at times, and it's having the tools and learning how to communicate and what to say, what not to say, how to be, that is key right now.
It's also, I think, most important, it's having the willingness to do those things. Because if it's kind of already too late and you go, no, I just can't be asked, I'm not going to bother, then you've gone to like the point of no return almost. You've got to be able to, you've got to want to pull back and go, yeah, okay, look, yeah, it takes two to tango. I need to do some work on myself as well as in the relationship. If you're
Absolutely.
prepared to do that, you can rescue the relationship. If you're not, then, sayonara.
I, either way, I think that the question always comes down to, for me it was anyway, how much longer do you want to spend living so unhappy? And when you sort of get used to the unhappiness and the unfulfillment and life being like a certain blandness almost, you wake up and think, oh, not another day. Like, how much longer did I want to stay in that situation? Well, I'd had enough of it. It was time to make some changes. And yes, I could blame everybody else, but the work started with me. And I could try and change him and try and change that person, but ultimately I needed to change myself
Mm.
first, and then things would change. And the willingness, absolutely, but the willingness is that the catalyst of how longer do you want to stay like this when life could be completely different.
So, would you call yourself a relationship coach, Laura Jane?
Yeah, yeah.
your book isn't called how to build a better relationship, is it?
No,
It's completely different.
exactly.
So how did I know the story of how the book came about, but how did a different book from what you're doing come about, if that makes sense?
Because this is sort of everything that I've learned up until a certain point,
Hmm.
and it was all about if I and I sort of didn't realize the link, and I didn't realize until my coach said only what you are not giving, that instead of being in that sort of victim mode, it was like I had to take control of myself. So the more than a mindset is I can try and do the affirmations and say, I've got an amazing relationship, my marriage is great, I'm a multimillionaire, you know, I could do all of that. But if I didn't really clear out some of the things, so one of the missing pieces, as you're asking before, is we talk about mindset. Well, what about our hearts? What about all the baggage we carry around with us in our hearts every single day? The resentments, the betrayals we've been through, the hurt we've been through, all of the grievances, the forgiveness work that we've not done. And often we think, right, I need to forgive such a body and such a body. But then we also need to forgive ourselves for what we've done or not done in certain situations. And that's where it sort of came from, that it's, for me, it's always an inside out job.
Hmm.
It's like if we get ourselves into a really good state and we work on the 5 areas that are in the book, then we do that and then we work on the relationship. It's like we can't just keep fixing everything on the outside until we've sort of come to peace with what's on the inside. So that's why it's an inside out. We work on
Gotcha.
our own relationship first and then we work on the relationship with other people.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree with that because it's all about internal work. What's going on up here, absolutely. So are you still in kind of book promotion mode, Laura Jane, or is there something else that you're doing at the moment?
Same thing. So I'm talking about the book, I'm promoting the book because we're still in lockdown. People are still in these crazy situations. So, and that was the catalyst for the book, really, to get it out there to help people in these times.
Hmm.
So, still doing that, still doing the podcast each week because that's sort of like a sanctuary for people, and it's sort of like a journal each week. It's whatever this week it will be about fear of missing out. It's whatever I've been through that week. It's sort of summarized on a Saturday, so people sort of link into that. But the main focus is on the relationship coaching and implementing, really bringing to life what's in the book and what's in the podcast. And the great, what they're like. These books are great, podcasts are great. When we actually work with somebody one to one and we actually apply what we need specifically to that person, because everybody's different, everybody's got a different story, different background, different fears, beliefs. Then when we apply the work specifically to that person, that's when things change. So
Hmm.
it's almost like it's all part of me, and it might be the podcast one day that reaches out, it might be the book, it might be the coaching, but it's all linked in now, and it just feels like me. It's like me on a page helping people, whether that's through the book, the podcast, or the coaching.
What's the best place or where's the best place for people to reach out to you?
I'm genuine. I can't say the word. I can't say that word today. I'm going to use a different word. I'm mostly on LinkedIn. I
Right.
just find the platform's really me. I really do like that platform. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, and they can get the book. The podcast is on all the usual channels: Apple, Spotify, Castbox, all of those. And the book is on Amazon and Kindle, and it's available now. So
Go
yeah.
on, flash us the book again. Come on, flash the
Oh,
book.
there we go. I've
Flash
got
it.
ASA. There we go.
Brilliant.
Born
I'll put all
Missing
the
People.
links in the show notes and such like. So, a couple of questions before we go. If you could go back in time and change something that happened or something that you did, would you do that? And why would you?
Oh my word. That is a good question. Part of me thinks no, because it's meant to be perfect, isn't it? Where you are now is meant to be perfect. Um, but part of me would love to have sort of known some of this a little bit earlier on. But then I wouldn't be where I am, would I? I wouldn't have hit the darkest times, and my marriage wouldn't have gone to a dark time. My relationships, I wouldn't have hit rock bottom. So I think from when you hit, I mean, my rock bottom was suicidal thoughts and working out like how to not be here anymore. So do I wish that I hadn't have happened? I guess I wouldn't. I guess the book wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be coaching people. So
Yeah, I got that particular T-shirt as well. I agree with you because if you did go back in time, say you went back 5 years and knew all of this stuff 5 years earlier, then you may well have stayed in corporate or gone in a completely different direction. We just, I know this is hypothetical, but the chances are you probably wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be having this discussion now.
it's that sort of, is it the serendipity sort of every moment, like a couple of things have even happened this morning where I'm like, oh my god, that is weird. Like that's just weird how that happened at this time, and how the book got into a certain person's hand, and if I'd done that 5 years ago, maybe it wouldn't.
Mm.
I kind of I try my best. I really do try. I'm not a finished article at all. Every day, that's why the tools are in the book, to keep reminding people so you can keep going back to them, because it's that trust of you're in the right place, that you're in the right, whatever you're going through at the moment is absolutely fine and perfect, and it's exactly what we need to be working on right now. So as much as I'd love to go back and be like, everything's perfect, my name was Laura Jane from being born, and I've always been myself and I've always believed in myself, I guess I wouldn't be here helping other people through that.
I completely agree. I see life as a kind of spider's web because every little junction on a spider's web, it's a decision. Now you
Yeah,
can either go left or right or up or down or
yeah.
for the diagonal, and
Hmm.
then you come to the next junction, the next decision, and you can't go back and unpick
Yeah.
those decisions. So we are, every single person on this planet is where they are as a result of all of those decisions that they've made previously. Now they might not like where they are, they might be in a really bad situation, but when it comes down to it, it's all as a result of these decisions that we've made. I mean,
Oh, I
okay, when
love
we're
that.
kids, when we're very, very young, the decisions are made for us. But when we get past a certain age, even when we're
Yeah.
teenagers, do I decide to do the homework? Do I decide to put an effort in at school and all this kind of thing? Do I make an effort to make more friends?
You know
Our
what?
life spans out.
That's so true. That's a really good way of looking at it. And even like if you'd asked me to be on your podcast, so this is why, a few years ago, I wouldn't have wanted to do it. I would have found an excuse, a reason why not to do it, not to speak, not to share my story. Who are you to share your story? Who are you to write a book? So I think you've sort of got to go through those dark times, haven't you? And that stuff and that shit and all the dark stuff, to really be like, what's the trigger? What's that point where you're going to think something needs to change? Try to change everything else. And it's ultimately up to me now to make a new decision. I might
Mm.
have decided wrongly in the past. I might have gone back with somebody that abused me and I shouldn't have gone back with. But this time I can choose again. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, because there's a movie which they remade, which is called Flatliners, where these kids, medical students, try to kind of bring on death so they can see what's going on beyond. But if you think about it, flatline is lifeless. Our lives are peaks and troughs and valleys and good stuff and bad stuff and fabulous stuff and horrendous stuff. And if you don't go through that, then you got to ask yourself the question, are we truly alive? Because if our life is that, we're not living.
Yeah.
Most lives are kind of like this and circles and crazy stuff all the time. Like we both talked about suicide. We both had, you've had a child. The tremendous emotions that go through carrying a child for 9 months and then birthing that child, and now you've got this life that you're responsible for. Those all the emotions and sensations that go through that, these highs, and then there's the lows of thinking about and calculating how to take your own life.
Yeah.
Two complete extremes.
Yeah.
But you have to go through those things, or you had to go through other things to get to where you are today. And I think we
Absolutely.
all have to recognize that. And if we don't like where we are, we've got to make different decisions.
The one thing, and I might not be able to remember it completely, but it's about not changing things, not wishing things were easier, but
Mm,
wishing you were stronger.
yeah.
And I think that's just come to me now that, there were many times where I sort of thought, why can't this be easier? Why is this so painful? And that's why I was, you know what? I was in the car one day coming home. I was so upset. It was that night when I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. This is just too horrific. And I've never told anybody this before because I'm not sure how it will land. But I just got this word across my head of victim, victim. And I was like, I'm not a victim. This is happening to me. This isn't fair. This situation isn't fair. I can't get pregnant. Everybody else is getting pregnant around me. And it was sort of a few days later when somebody told me to write what I'm grateful for about the situation of another miscarriage. And I thought, this woman is crazy. Like, I'm paying this woman and she's crazy. And I got one thing written down. And by the time 2 weeks later, I had 18 points about why the situation was good. And the biggest one is compassion, like compassion for other people and what they may or may not be going through. And I would never have learned that. I was so sort of wrapped up in my own head about what I was getting, what was the next goal for me, and not realizing that the person next to me on the train or plane or wherever might be in some really bad pain at the minute, and I could help and be kind, or I could not be kind, and I didn't know what compassion was until that point.
Life is life, basically, isn't it? The ups and downs, the peaks and troughs, the good, the bad, the indifferent. And the only thing I can say to anyone really is you do the best you can with what you've got. And if you want to change things, make different decisions, because we've all done it. We've all been in a situation, we've made a mistake, and then we've gone and repeated the same bloody mistake again and again and again. And eventually somebody knocks you on the head and goes, Paul, are you in there? Are you in there,
Yeah,
sunshine? That's 3 times
I
you've
know.
done that. Don't you think it's time to change it? And you go, yeah, good point. I think I'll make a different decision next time.
Yeah.
Listen, Laura Jane, it's been absolutely brilliant chatting with you today. Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you so
time.
much for having me on.
One more quick flash of the book before we go.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! And listen, grab the book, folks. I'll post all the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and speak to you all again soon. Bye.
Thank you.